My name is Danielle Topizer, and I'm the Program Director for the Thompson-Nicola Conservation Collaborative. So the TNCC respectfully acknowledges that that we work and operate and live on the unceded territory of Secwepemc, St'át'imc, Syilx, and Micmallam and Tsilhqot'in nations. We're expecting this webinar to last up to 30 minutes, so please do type your questions into the Q&A, not the chat, and we'll answer them at the end. Please do continue just to pop in your information, where you're from, etc., into the chat. That's much appreciated. It's nice to know who we have joining and from where. If you have any challenges with any of the technology, Ali will aim to help us out this morning. So we wanted to take an opportunity to introduce ourselves and also to share with you what we've been working on over this last year. So I'll tell you a little bit about the TNCC and the Conservation Action Plan, and then we'll talk a little bit about next steps and implementation, and there'll be some Q&A at the end. So firstly, the TNCC, what we are. I wanted to just share a little bit about that because we are a relatively new organization. We are a collaborative effort involving more than 40 organizations, agencies, Indigenous communities, and stewardship groups that work in partnership to achieve common goals related to environmental protection, biodiversity conservation, and sustainable resource management. We are guided by a diverse steering committee that is representative of those partners. You'll see reference, for more reference, you'll see some links in the chat to our TNCC website and our steering committee, and also our strategic plan. So please feel free to check those out. So the TNCC, our work is to develop and foster a common vision and goals, identify some priority issues, and develop and implement actions that address those issues in the conservation and sustainable management within the Thompson watershed. Our work is focused around increasing communication, networking, and information sharing amongst partners, including new information and best practices. There's a lot of really great efforts and work being done in the watershed. It's where our goal is to help try to share out so we can build some efficiencies and have stronger communication and networking. We also identify where there may be some gaps in data or information and help to fill those gaps through research and activities amongst partners and by reducing duplication. And we also aim to facilitate some capacity building for partners, and that may come in a variety of forms, whether it's funding at times, or it might look like training opportunities, education, etc. So our approach is to really support and recognize Indigenous land stewardship within the watershed, to balance human and economic needs. And we work at a landscape level approach. We tend to focus more on ecosystem level approach as opposed to species at risk, recognizing that if we're supporting healthy ecosystems, we're hopefully then supporting healthy species at risk and other species as well. So just a little bit about the Thompson watershed and why it's significant, and the focus of the efforts of the collaborative. So the Government of Canada has identified 11 priority places for biodiversity conservation, including BC's dry interior, of which the Thompson-Nicola region is 45%. The Thompson-Nicola region has 23 species that are at risk globally, 57 that are nationally at risk and listed under the Canadian Species at Risk Act, and 175 provincially listed species at risk. These include grasslands, which occupy less than 1% of the provincial land base, but provide critical habitat to more than 30% of species that are deemed threatened or endangered. In the dry interior ecosystems, wetlands provide critical habitat for many species, both endemic and migratory. The region is also home to far-ranging terrestrial animals, including California bighorn sheep, mountain goats, elk, moose, black bear, cougar, wolf, coyote, deer, and threatened population of grizzly bear and caribou, and several of which these are also culturally very significant as well. So I just wanted to focus now on the Conservation Action Plan and tell you a little bit about what we've been working on. So working with our consultant, Derek Peterson from Practical Conservation. Derek is joining us today, so he will be available if we have some in-depth specific questions that we want to have his opinion or insight on. We've been developing a conservation action plan. We call it a CAP for short. It provides a framework for partners to work together to identify and co-invest in shared priority actions that would contribute to maintaining healthy fish and wildlife populations, plants and habitats, and ecological functions within the watershed and within the Thompson-Nicola for the next 10 to 15 years. And it's informed by existing regional plans, data, and input from partners. So it truly is a collaborative effort. We initiated work on the Conservation Action Plan last year with funding from Environment and Climate Change Canada, the province of BC, Wilberforce Foundation, and Sitka Foundation. And just for reference too, this is a lovely photo. It is a photo of invasive knapweed in Cache Creek area. So just wanted to draw attention. It's not just beautiful flowers. Okay, and then talking about where is the CAP planning area? So the CAP planning area is broadly defined by the existing boundary of the Thompson watershed. We did determine early on that the portion of the South Thompson River subwatershed that is administered by the Regional District of the North Okanagan is excluded, as will the area that encompasses the work that's being conducted by the Nicola Watershed Governance Partnership, otherwise known as the NWGP, within the Nicola River subwatershed. And this is just in respect to other processes that are going on. The province is working within an NWGP with the Nicola 5 bands and communities. So they have a process that is underway there. So recognizing that we're focused on ecosystems and cultural and human well-being. So a lot of the work that we've accomplished throughout this action planning process is really ecosystems based, and it's not jurisdictional or boundary affected by boundaries necessarily. So the initial phase of the Conservation Action Plan this year is part of an overall 10 to 15 year action planning process. To create the plan, we've gained input on 6 key components of the plan. That includes the vision, you'll see under making the plan, the vision, the conservation values, the threats, the goals, the strategies, and the actions. And I'll walk you through each of these 6 steps at a high level and how we've gone about approaching those different pieces. And while we're looking at the overall process, you can see that the next phase will also focus on implementation. So we'll be looking to start this in the new year. So starting in April, the new fiscal year. And then that includes implementation. And then beyond that is monitoring and adaptation over a 10 to 15 year time frame. So the planning process started kind of mid-year last year. And I guess earlier than that, we started an engagement process really in April, May last year. And that was working with bringing together and communicating with different regional conservation practitioners, Indigenous land managers, federal, provincial, and local governments, academia, private sector, and other experts. We reached out to all Indigenous communities and organizations within the Thompson watershed to invite participation and engagement in the process. We've worked with all of these lists of individuals to then bring together some planning sessions, some workshopping sessions that we worked on throughout the fall. And you can see in October and December, we had 2 two-day workshops, and this is the breakdown of those organizations or representatives that were involved. And I just thought it would be interesting to share with you those participants or the organizations or agencies or communities that came together throughout these working sessions. It's a fairly extensive list, and you'll see it's really quite collaborative and is inclusive of a great many organizations and agencies and communities that are working within the region. So together, the first person in working session, participants collaborated to develop a vision. That was a very important part of the process, or to set the stage of the process, so that we could see what is our collaborative vision, what do we expect or want to get out of this. So the vision that we came up with was to collaboratively steward the land and to support biodiverse ecosystems that are healthy, resilient, and sustain cultural values. So those values that we looked at, participants identified the conservation values to work on, and the values consist of ecological values, but also human well-being and cultural values. And so that's the list on the right there. It's a fairly extensive list of values. And then for each of these values, we looked at what are the indicators of health. So how do we determine how these values are healthy? And this was a process that was facilitated with participants working in small groups. So again, the values are the important things that we want to conserve and look after. They're both ecological and also cultural and socioeconomic values. And then part of that process, like I said, is working through kind of what's important and what is indicative of these values. And then following each of these sessions, we shared out a what we heard style report back to participants for consideration and feedback. And we ended up, I think, on 14 different values. We did do a little bit of brainstorming and collaboration and conversation around, should some of these be combined? Should they not be combined? In the end, we did end up adding montane coniferous forest and high cold coniferous forest, but we grouped alpine, parkland, and woodland together. So it's been a bit of a process, and lots of head scratchers for sure. So moving forward, for each value working session, participants then continued on by identifying what's the current condition of those values and what are the goals and what is the desired outcome for each of those values by 2039. So moving on to the next working session, then participants worked through a process to identify those highest ranked priority stressors or pressures to those values. So the stressors were derived from determining the causes of the identified impacts to the indicators of health. And then in the condensed cap under when it's distributed out, you'll see a combined table of stressors on the level of threats in each conservation value. So these are the ones that we've come up with as a group collaboratively. These are all the stressors that have been identified. So alteration to natural hydrology, human intrusions and disturbances, climate change and severe weather, agricultural practices, invasive species, pests and pathogens, altered fire regimes, natural resource extraction, and transportation and service corridors. So strategy development has focused on either addressing those key threats or stressors or improving the health of the key conservation values, or both. To land on this list, a broad range of conservation strategies were considered, including those in existing documents such as land use and conservation plans, making sure that we're not reinventing the wheel, that we're learning from what others have done, and we're bringing forward current and relevant information and ideas and thoughts into this action plan. Working session participants and conservation partners work to brainstorm and identify additional strategies and actions. Rather than standalone stressor, climate change was considered across the board as a compounding factor. So using a variety of different diagrammatic tools, situation models, and results chains, we worked to identify and select a variety of actions that will help to achieve the outcomes. So 2 overarching strategies have been added to ensure that we're tackling them on a broad and important basis, and that includes establishing collaborative partnerships to address key knowledge gaps and collaborating on the land. So next, these are the strategies. There are a series of number of actions that are associated with each of these strategies that will be shared out through our next steps. So the next steps for implementation after this conservation action plan has been developed and shared out is that the conservation action plan in itself is going to be about 200 pages. So we'll be condensing that. Currently, it includes appendices, maps, tables, etc. So in April, we'll be sharing out the conservation action plan and a summarized version that's a little bit easier for folks to work through. And nobody expects anybody to read through a 200-page document. So we'll be taking that information and synthesizing it so that it's workable with different groups. We do have an advisory team that will guide the next steps of the process, and we are expecting that the advisory team will work with the data that we have, and then implementation teams will be struck based on the grouping of those related actions. And then it may look like a policy-related implementation team. It may look like a dry interior ecosystem implementation team. It'll be that grouping of all those actions, which then makes sense for the team to target and to be focused on. So they'll review those actions and strategies, they'll prioritize those actions and assess where the gaps are and where the opportunities are and what resources are available. And then they'll work to develop summarizing some priority actions to start really tackling on the ground. There'll be a number of different opportunities to engage and support in the next steps as we move forward. We're more than happy to continue to keep folks in the loop through our e-newsletter. If you haven't already, please do sign up. I think Allie's going to drop that into the chat. As well, we'll be looking for different opportunities to continue to engage others as we move forward. So I'm going to wrap there. If we do have some time remaining for questions and answers, if you haven't already, please post any questions in the Q&A function of the Zoom. And yeah, happy to take some questions. Is there any, happy to take any questions if there are any, maybe it's all self-explanatory. Derek, I'm happy to open it up to you as well if there's anything that I missed or if you'd like to elaborate on anything.
No, I think you did a great job of keeping it high level, Danielle. Obviously, there's a huge amount of detail behind all of the points that you raised. Yeah, it's been an interesting process. I mean, it's a huge planning area, close to 56,000 square kilometers. So we can appreciate the scope of the conservation values that we're undertaking, and then to layer on top of that the human well-being and cultural, I think has been an important step forward for conservation action planning, and just glad to see that the Thompson-Nicola Conservation Collaborative has endorsed that approach. And yeah, look forward to getting it out there and moving forward with actions on the ground, which I think is everyone's priority these days.
Great, thanks, Tarek. Matthew posted a question. Can you comment on the timelines again? For sure. So we are wrapping up the development of the Conservation Action Plan this month. It'll be finalized and shared with our funders by the end of this month. And then we'll be bringing that forward into April. We'll be doing a condensed version of that that's a little bit more synthesized, and then we'll be sharing that out. And then in April, May, our advisory team that is guiding the Conservation Action Plan development will be meeting to start working through next steps. And that's looking at those strategies and actions and bundling those actions, at least initially, for developing or determining what our implementation teams might look like. it's an assumption, but probably fairly accurate that dry interior ecosystems is probably going to be a focal implementation team, at least to start. So we'll be looking at the series of actions that fall within that team, and then that team will be convening to work through what are those actions? Are they the right suite of actions? Are any missing? Who's already doing what on the ground? What are the resources available? What are the known gaps? How do we start to fill those gaps? And then we can really start to dig into prioritizing the actions that are needed to help support a healthy dry interior ecosystem. So April, May, you'll start to, there'll be more opportunities for implementation teams to meet and move forward. Hopefully that answers that question. Any other questions? All right. Well, if there's no other questions, please do certainly feel free to reach out to me. I think I did forget to share the screen that had my email address. Ali, if you're able to pop that into the chat, that would be wonderful. It's manager@tnccollaborative.org. And yeah, I'm happy to connect, answer any additional questions. I did try to keep this rather high level because it's been several months worth of working with the working groups and digging into a process that is quite detailed to arrive at the strategies and actions that we have. So there's 200 pages to synthesize into a half-hour webinar is tough to do, but hopefully you'll be able to provide some feedback when you do see the condensed version, and certainly reach out to me if you have any questions or would like more information or get involved. So, thanks everybody for joining, and yeah, the webinar will be recorded and posted and shared out in our April e-newsletter. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks again.